guys hear me? Okay, perfect. So thank you for that introduction to everybody on the panel here. We have a very interesting topic, but before we start on the panel, I'd like to congratulate Person, the new person on the table that we have as well. So kudos to you. Okay, so interesting topic, campaigns from the heart, importance of campaigns with purpose. Uh, while we were discussing about this yesterday in our call, I went and said, okay, let me just do a little review on how it has been and how we have grown over the last few years. And there's some interesting stats, and we all know and we all understand Earth is at the tipping point. People, planet, profit is something that's picking up. Shared value is something that a lot of organizations are talking about globally, not just in India. But interestingly, there's a key trend that's now emerging, which is the conscious consumerism. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it. But if you go back 10 years from today and you look at 2014, about 50% consumers were willing to pay extra for sustainable products at that point in time. And if you look at the stats for today, which is 2024, 10 years from there, it's 78% consumers actually who say that they're willing to pay extra for products that are sustainable, which is kudos to all of us and everyone who's a consumer in the room and outside. But if you go a little deeper, you say Gartner has an interesting report which says 85% investors consider ESG points in their due diligence. So a lot of responsibility that's coming on businesses. But interestingly, only 60% companies have sustainability strategies, which is really very, very, very worrisome for all of us. So making great products is really important, but at the same time, you have to embed sustainability into your entire end-to-end strategy, which is becoming a bigger challenge. So some of the questions we're going to debate and deliberate and discuss on this panel is today, are purpose-led campaigns impactful for business? Are the goals for such campaigns different? What are the challenges we face as PR and comms professionals? How do we overcome them? How do we drive trust, et cetera, et cetera? So without further ado, I'd like to start with the first question, and we see a lot of campaigns out there today which claim and say that we are driving this from a purpose perspective. So let's define what is real purpose. So with that, I'd like to maybe start with Ajay, since he's right at the head of the table. So over to you, Ajay. What is real purpose and how would you define it?
Thank you, Aarti. Hi. I think I work with healthcare chain, that is Fortis Healthcare. So for us, the real purpose is to take care of the patient, and we say care for good. So it's not about profit. I mean, what is our core value, what we really want to do for the people of the country, or maybe the people who are suffering, who have ailment. So it becomes the core for us. It's not just profit. Everybody works for profit for sure. It's part of their, about the company's core, this thing. But it's beyond profit, what you do, what you want to achieve, what you want to deliver. So that core thing which is there, that's the real purpose of an organization. And how do we implement it in our day-to-day work, what we do? How do we take care of the patients who come to our hospital? And what is the core of and the vision of the company? So implementing everything, ensuring that we're able to deliver it, and not just profit that's the core. I think that the real purpose of organization, what we exist for, and how do we take care of the patient, heal them for a better life.
Thank you, Ajay. So I think purpose here comes more around caring and going deep into the core values. So great point. Deepshika, over to you.
Okay, so like you said, Aarti, today is a very momentous day for us because we're becoming Burson. And I want to actually start with our purpose. And we are purpose-built to help clients create value through repetition. So it's not what we do, but actually why we exist. And that is purpose. And often purpose does get confused with CSR, sustainability, and yes, they are linked. But I think when you look at defining what is the core purpose of your existence as a business, that is the why question you are answering. And most often, companies go through a journey, create campaigns and all that. But I think they forget to articulate this purpose for themselves and most importantly for their multiple stakeholders. And with that's why actually purpose is becoming so important today, especially in the PR communication space. And actually I'd say we PR professionals should own the space of purpose. We should not give it up to marketing, brand consultants, and so on. And that's really my appeal to all of us, because we are truly the people who will do multiple stakeholder engagement and communication. And that again goes back to defining purpose. When you're able to align all your stakeholders to your purpose, that's when it becomes real. And that's when the magic starts happening in an organization. It goes across the length and breadth of the organization. Every department, every function, every employee, the way you do your vendor relationships, all get defined from that purpose statement. And so it's a lot of hard work. It's not easy. It's not, I mean, if you'll indulge me, it's probably more difficult than coming up with a tagline for a brand. Because often a brand will only address consumers. Whereas when you're talking about a purpose statement for an organization, and I say organization, whether it's a brand or a corporate or it's a larger entity, right? And it like links back, therefore, to your reputation, you have to spend more time understanding the why of your existence. What does it mean to each of your stakeholders, and then be able to align that. And if you don't have that alignment, that's when it doesn't work.
Great.
And then it's sort of said, okay, I'm not sure if purpose works.
Great. Thanks. Those are like pearls of wisdom. So why do we exist? And let's make purpose and part of our entire ecosystem as well. Over to you, Shonali. Your thoughts.
Thank you, and I hate to repeat some of what has already been said, so in the interest of maybe adding a little bit more color and a slight divergence to the conversation, at a 30,000 feet level, perhaps purpose sounds very goody-goody, something that is too aspirational, what the brand or the company should aspire for, definitely not related to profits. But personally, this has been perhaps my learning in the last few years, the more authentic your purpose is, easier to understand, simpler, easier for comms, marketing, sales, any part of the business to really be able to live it and emulate it, right? So what I mean to say is that purpose has to be something that aligns very closely with the organization's mission and objectives, right? Might sound very plain vanilla, but a lot of times vanilla language is what makes the business tick, what enables an organization to do better. If you were to think about what you do in an organization, that corresponds to maybe the organization's mission. How you do it corresponds to its values. And I'll borrow a leaf from Deepshika's book. Why you do it has to be what your purpose is, right? So that thought really has to perhaps translate or transfer itself into the way that you set about your communications or your business operations. And I think that's what people want. To your point, consumers today are more conscious because they need to see that there is that practice what you preach happening.
Thanks, Shonali. So authenticity, I think, is what's coming out strong, linked to vision and mission. Sameer, over to you.
Thanks, Aarti. Pleasure meeting you after such a long time. So a lot has been said already, and I don't want to repeat it. So I'll just add more, my color. Two things here. I think we all understand that businesses exist for profit. Right? Beyond that, how do you give it back to the society? That is purpose. Now, the operative word to my mind is long term. Right? It has to be long term because impact will not happen in a few months. Helping 100 people for 100 days is not purpose. That is a campaign. And we need to differentiate. I mean, I am a firm philosopher. As a consumer, I don't consume products which go in this direction. As a practitioner, I follow this belief and believe anything you do, if you are doing something for purpose, publicity will follow organically. you don't do press releases for that, right? So that to me is core and how I define, purpose.
Thanks, Amir. So long-term viewpoint, I think that's what's coming out strongly here. Amrit,
Yes,
over
I
to
think
you.
everybody said everything, so I'm going to just kind of twist it on
We
the
save
head.
the best for last, as they say.
Twist it on the head. So three things. I think as comms professional, purpose is a great opportunity because brands are realizing the importance of purpose. And what that holds for comms professional is that you intersect your narrative building around business, CSR, sales, everything, ESG, all the buzzwords that are going, and be very, very mindful of purpose washing because there is a lot of purpose washing also that's going on. So as comms professional, it's a huge opportunity for us to really completely think differently. The second thing is, I think purpose, till it's not aligned, which is like, what does the CEO think? What does the brand purpose think? And what are some of the things that you're looking at making impact? You cannot have. So alignment is very, very key. And I think the last thing that is there's got something known as patient capital. Because as Samir said, that impact needs a lot of patience. And does a brand or a business or a CSR have the gumption to have that patience? So I think that's very key. And not to make a plug, but I have gone through this journey as an individual of where I, said bye-bye to my corporate career because I came to a point of that, what is my purpose in life? And it took a lot of guts, but yes, 5 years back I realized I will only consult brands in the social impact space and I will work with people. So I have a statement for myself, which is that I help people and brands from impossible dreams to I'm possible. So that's why even my introduction says comms professional and leadership coach. So, once you've individually gone to that journey, then you know what it takes. It was not an easy journey. So when working with brands, I'm able to talk about all of these things. And I think as comms professional, that's what we should be thinking. Patient capital, long term, no shots in the arms for purpose.
Thanks, Amrit. So alignment, I think, coming up really, really strongly, whether it's for the self, for the business, or for the world at large. Okay, so we'll quickly move into our next question. And looking at my notes, are brands really doing purpose-led actions, or is it just campaign speak? And like Amrit just mentioned, I think. So I'd like to maybe ask Amrit first, because she raised this question point right here and now.
Yeah,
So
sure.
over to you.
So I think, yes, definitely it's an evolving space and a lot of brands are doing, just campaigns for purpose. Few have the gumption for patient capital. And I think the good thing that happened in COVID was that there was a realization that you have to, think about humanity, you have to think about crisis, and there has to be a purpose. And just one example that I'll give is that, I don't know how many of you, maybe you can do a raise of hands, you've heard about ACT grants. ACT grants is something that happened during COVID, where the corporate world, the entrepreneurial world, the CSR world, and the government collaborated. And what they did was that for COVID, they said, entrepreneurs will come up with solutions that work for India. VC said, we will put our money into that. Government said, if it's a great solution, we will take to scale. So really, when you're, thinking of a long-term purpose-driven campaign, it just has to be all these players coming together. And if you haven't read about ACT grants, I would say just please go and look at it. And just a small example, door-to-door COVID testing, which we all, had, which was at homes, went to the world from India, and lots of other things. And now ACT Trans has just taken it further to work on some other areas. So really this collaboration and having a long-term view is what really helps purpose and not just a campaign. I'm just definitely not in for just what's a great campaign that was done just for purpose.
Okay, Shunali, I think you're itching to say something, so
Yes.
over to you.
Thank you. And, because COVID in long term, I kind of slightly agree with Amrit, of course, and slightly disagree. And I hate for a product plug or a company plug at this point, but there is an organization that I work for in the field of technology where I think, long term is days and short term is nanoseconds. So during COVID, we married high performance computing with cutting edge medical research, leading to creating something called the genomics optimization and scalability tool. Simply put, what it did was accelerated genome sequencing outcomes from what would take 2 weeks to less than 48 minutes. And this helped not only companies that were working in drug discovery, of course, we partnered with the government of India. Delhi University is running it for crop research and whatnot. Um, so sometimes impact, right, is not necessarily divorced from business sense. And again, I want to come back to my plain vanilla point that yes, you can continue to make purposeful impact without necessarily compromising on the economics of it all. So, Aarti, you mentioned CSR and creating shared value, CSR versus CSV. Somewhere I feel that I would prefer to align more with CSV than CSR for it to be meaningfully long-term for the organization, as well as for, stakeholders. And by stakeholders, I not only mean the larger public, all organizations confess to exist for the greater good, but at the same time, they also exist for their investors. And you can only continue to do greater good as long as you continue to make money. So
True.
maybe technology helps you get a little smarter at doing that.
Yeah,
or
so I
making
think today's
both
day
those
and
worlds.
age, I think the tech world is making great strides and helping humanity in the direction of CSR, CSV. But Deepshika, you are wanting to say something.
Yeah, your question was, are companies really doing purpose campaigns? So answer is yes, they are. The question, if I would expand it further, is how are they making it long term? To Sameer's point, your point earlier, how authentic is that campaign to link back to my business? And I think somebody else brought up that point of
And I
the
think more than
impact
link back, also the long-term piece. How is
Yes.
it actually translating through the entire
through the entire
end-to-end
organization.
chain of the organization?
And which brings me to the third point on the impact that you are creating, right? So I don't want to take away that, oh, this brand is just doing this for a short term, 3-month thing and so on. I think it's also a journey, Aarti. It's, you have to have the courage to begin somewhere. And it's okay for brands to begin at some point and start with one campaign and learn along the way. So I would hate to sort of call out brand campaigns saying, oh, this is just speak. And again, I come back to us and our role as communication consultants, or what we say as trusted partners for our clients. It's our responsibility to also show the path with companies on how do you translate this purpose into real action, which will then show you impact. So let me give you an example. We work with a Britannia brand, Marigold, and it's your favorite tea time biscuit, actually. Very simple brand tagline. But when the brand went out, it did research with its most important core stakeholder or audience, which was women in the home. They looked at what are these women's dreams and aspirations. And we went back and said, how can we help fulfill those dreams and aspirations? So moving away from just a brand campaign, we actually went into the space of purpose and said, how can we enable more women to realize their dreams? And it became the Britannia Marigold campaign, which has now, I think there were over 1,000 women who've participated in it. 40 has started their entrepreneurial journey. And it's something which is long term. It's a year-on-year annual property which is being built and which is gaining value. And the last point on this is, how will I measure the impact of this? It will be the impact on the brand equity. And there are enough measures today to discover what is the brand equity impact, right? I mean, pick up a measurement like a brand Z, which picks both brand consumer equity as well as financial gains, right? It combines both those values to give you what will be your brand equity and financial gain status. So if you're able to align it and you're able to make it consistent and most importantly, back it up with action. It's not about just putting it out. I'll put out one ad. I will put out one CSR program I'm doing, but you actually back it up with real action and consistently live through it and keep tweaking it. It's never going to be perfect on day one, right?
True,
have
it's a
that.
journey, as they say, and yes, authenticity with consistency is important.
Absolutely. I think that the key word
Samir.
to me is authenticity, that Deepshika said. I mean, keep at it. And of course, to Shonali's point, CSV, very critical. You cannot do purposeful, you cannot meet your purpose-led objectives if you are not financially sound. That's clear. But the kind of noise that we see around and the kind of impact as a corporate world, and I'm talking about all corporates here, we have had on the society, I think there is a lot to be desired. And as reputation custodians, we need to be very open enough to accept the fact that there is a lot that needs to be done still, right? So we may have moved. I mean, mentally, I think a lot of consumers have already moved from a campaign-led purpose organization from a campaign-led purpose to a purpose-led organization. That pivot has already happened, and this will continue to accelerate as social media makes everybody more informed. And especially in this domain, I mean, today we were talking in the earlier session about trolls and whatnot. In this cancel culture, you need to be authentic. Otherwise, you're risking yourself. And once you're authentic, trust comes in. And long-term organizations are built on reputation. And that reputation comes from trust, repeat customers, and what you're delivering back to the society. It's a mix of everything.
Thanks, Samir. So I just want to ask Ajay and a sort of affiliated question around this. Greenwashing. I know everybody's talking about purpose-led and campaign speak, etc., etc. But do you think greenwashing is really happening, or are businesses actually doing some actions around the campaigns that they're pushing out?
This is a very, very key subject which we all are facing. I think most of the brands are going through this. And in fact, few days back, I think last month, there was an order from Supreme Court also from in the healthcare department, where all the campaigns, any advertisement they're going to take out, they have to put it across on the government website. They have to take an approval before they go out. Because you've seen a lot of brands which are struggling in the courts right now because of their false claims. And we have seen most of the brands going through it right now, which we have been seen from our childhood, like, I don't want to name the brands, but this is an actual picture. So I think it's important for everybody to realize what they claim, what they portray, or whatever they are publishing, and whatever the label says has to be authentic. Like we talked about authenticity of the products, how it's going to be beneficial, what are the key things, what are the key factors, because a lot of misinformation is there. Like during the COVID times, we were fighting it out almost every day because a lot of claims were coming towards the treatment, towards the vaccination drive which was going on, what is going to be the side effect, or maybe it's not going to be good. Different things were there. So I think getting the right information in place as a brand, the reliability, the trust, what you attain with your authenticity and with your transparency is very crucial in the current scenario. And as we talked about social media, they're going to troll you and make sure the life is hell if you're not able to share the right information.
Thank you so much. So yes, I think we've covered the topic of greenwashing pretty strongly. I'll move to the next question, which is, what are the challenges linked to purpose-led PR and how can we overcome them? Shonali, you want to go first?
Yeah, and I want to borrow a leaf from greenwashing, of course, that in more ways than one presents itself as a challenge. And when you talked about government ads, I couldn't help but wonder, apart from greenwashing as well, there are, of course, certain, outside of trolls on the other side, there are people who are, making a lot of effort to let consumers like us know what are we really consuming. Food Farmer and the others, misleading information, whether it is in terms of how you position your ESG targets or how you position your, so-called wellness attributes in the products that you create. Of course, is a challenge. So that, in more ways than one, means that an organization has to stop exaggerating its purpose for it to be authentic. It has to be rooted in ground realities, in things, and I loved Amrit's point again about how she derives her sense of purpose. It has to make meaning. I think we're all in comms for donkey's years now. So after a point, for us to be able to wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to sell more bottles of Coca-Cola today, or go sell some servers, it has to make sense to me at an individual level, right? And related to that, and that's my 30 seconds really, is the fact that whatever targets or whatever metrics that we attribute to purpose also have to be meaningful. Deepshika talked about how today purpose can be measured. I still feel there is a long way to go there. And it, again, has to make economic sense. For instance, if I'm selling a technology product, as a company, I need to commit to maybe net zero by 2050. What am I doing at my own end? And so it has to make economic sense, and I also have to walk my own talk.
Totally, totally. I'd like to ask you, Amrit, actually a related question, which is around the same aspect. You're coming from the social impact world now and completely purpose driven. What are the challenges you face when it comes to doing PR and communications around this? Because that's that, and how do you overcome them? How do you build the narrative really?
Yeah, so I think it's no different in terms of building narratives because it's the same thing. In fact, I think I bring all my learnings of the corporate world into the social sector, and I'm better equipped to build a narrative. I'm more process driven, so it's, those are some of the things. But I think three or four things that you have to do in the social impact space, and I wish the corporate world will also adopt some of these. A very clear theory of change, I mean, a theory of change for the purpose that you are going to have, and a very clear measurability index. So, and that, which the social sector in India is pushing for, is to have a social stock exchange in India. London has a social stock exchange, some other countries have a social stock exchange. What that helps is, you put your purpose out there, you put out that these are the funds that I need, and there will be bodies which will help you design how to measure the impact. And I think as those measurability indexes become more visible and become transparent, then the trust will happen. So in the social sector, that's a lot. There's a lot that's happening on monitoring and evaluation, and that's something that I had to learn new. So today when I do think of a campaign, I just have to think of scale. So, I always have to think of scale, who's going to be my biggest partner, and it's always the government. So I have to work with stakeholders in the government, and I have to see how can I get them to adopt it as a mission mode. I have to think measurability, because I'm very accountable to the funders, I'm very accountable to the international organizations and a lot of international funders who want to see what's the impact that was made. So there are lots of designs that you have to keep on. So as a comms person, I'm no longer just the creative person and thinking campaign. Measurability and impact are the number one thing that I start with and then start working backwards. So I wish, so I'm sure it's an evolving field, and even the corporate world will start adopting some of these things. And as we talk more, I will bring up an example, which is my favorite, about being very creative also in the social sector. So, but I'm just going to get the others to speak right now.
Thanks, Amrit. Deepshika has her mic on in her hand. But
No, I was going to say Amrit has sort of covered a lot of that on the measurement part. I'll just add, because the question is the challenge. I think I've done a lot of now work in this space for the last 2-3 years, not as much as you, of course, Amrit. It's how do you set the milestones? How do you set the goals? What happens is you start here, and then you're struggling after a year to measure back to here. Versus when you start here, how do you break it down into smaller milestones,
so do you
right?
have milestones linked to comms, or is it business?
The purpose.
Impact.
It's not about comms, it's not about business.
That's a very
Comms
important
comes
point.
later.
It has to be linked to purpose,
Absolutely.
not business.
And literally forcing yourself to put down those smaller milestones, which will finally add up. I'll give you anecdotally, everybody's putting sustainability reports together, right? Biggest challenge? So what were your goals last year? And where have you reached now? No, these are 10-year goals. I agree they're 10-year goals, but how do we show progress? And you have to show progress year on year, because you can't just keep talking about 10-year goals.
Purpose-led progress.
Yeah, bingo, I think I completely agree. In a boardroom, when there is a presentation being made by, say, marketing or all other departments where bar charts, pie charts, specified decimals of percentage increase, here you come with your long-term, philosophy, in which, it's not as defined in terms of
Patient capital.
impact. Exactly. And how do you win that battle internally in the boardroom is the biggest challenge.
That's true.
That is
absolutely.
the real game. How do you convince internal stakeholders to look long term, to show them the real value long term, and then of course, go authentically working on ground to deliver that value. Once that impact happens, everything comes together. But it's a cycle that, organizations, specifically today when there are so many startups, they have to go through. Sorry, I just finished the point.
No, with you.
See, an organization which has stayed in the game for a long term probably has seen the ups and downs. New organizations find it more difficult.
So I have actually a question for Samir because, I partially agree and partially disagree.
Sonali is taking over my role.
Hopefully with your consent, Aarti. And, are we assuming then is it a communication issue if we are not able to communicate to our business stakeholders that they have to be purpose-driven? And are we assuming that business is divorced
So
from
no,
purpose?
no, no, no. I'm
That
not
folks
getting
in the
it.
boardroom aren't necessarily thinking
No,
short-term and long-term purpose-driven goals for the business? And why shouldn't it necessarily make economic sense? Don't they see value of purpose-driven capital?
Again, Shonali, we need to generalize it. When you look at it from a 30,000 level, I'm generalizing for the corporate world. Uh, when we are talking to, as custodians, talking to stakeholders, specifically business leaders, who their metrics, ROI, the term used internally. Now, ROI, how do you define ROI when you're in the middle of investment and you know if at all the dividends will come in the long term? How do you win that battle initially? Once you're well into it, it becomes easier. But establishing it, growing it, and maturing it is the real game. And that is where the real task is.
Yeah, no, fantastic point. I think maturity and maturing it in the process, it's a journey at the end of the day. You're not going to achieve it in short term for sure. I'll quickly move to the last question because we're running out of time. I'm looking at the clock here as well. So are brands really deriving trust from purpose-led PR? And how should you be strategizing for winning stakeholder hearts at the end of the day? I think that's coming from also the perspective of greenwashing, because a lot of brands we are seeing, if only 60% of companies are actually embedding sustainability in their entire end-to-end strategy, there is not so much action on the ground, which means there is more campaign speak than actually purpose-led actions. So with that logic, how does trust happen? And do consumers and other stakeholders, investors, as an example, do they really see through it? Or do they actually get trusted with the brands that they are actually engaged with? Who wants to go first?
It almost seems like fastest finger first because I know everyone has a lot of things to say here. I think trust really comes from authenticity. And to Samir's point, ultimately for a campaign to make sense, to even provide that long-term ROI to business or be equitably measurable on the PR side of things, it has to be based on achievable outcomes, meaningful outcomes, things that are that can be seen in the short term, and of course, progress can be seen from a long-term perspective for that trust to really build and grow. And I'll of course let the others.
And I think this is where communications now comes in, Aarti, right? If you're going to build trust with the organization, all these things that we've spoken about that the company should do, whose responsibility is it to put it out there? We as communicators. And if we do a good job with the messaging, the proof points, the measurement metrics, and actively communicate to the multiple stakeholders, that's how the trust will get built. The reason why, I shouldn't say reason, unfortunately the greenwashing examples get highlighted more, right? Thanks to social media and our love for sensational. Those are the ones which get the headlines and everybody excited. How many times do you see so much excitement about goals being met, about actual behavior change models being taken? And I'm sorry, but to my media colleagues and friends over here, try pitching a story on success of social purpose and social programs, right? It is tough. Okay.
What excites
So I
the
think,
media around purpose? I think that's an
yes,
important point.
and I think that's the journey we have to make together, and that's the role of us as communicators. Because you asked me this question, right? Where do communicators come in? This is our
So
job.
just
So
on
I
that,
think
I
point
said,
for Karan.
sorry.
We should take that up in the next debate that's
Yes.
happening between media and comms professionals.
Since I said I'm going to save one thing for the last, it's just going to take a second. I know time's up. You've talked about campaigns and trust in media. So please look up. In the Paris Olympics, in the Paris Marathon, there was a lady from Ghana who walked with a jerry can of water on her head. And when she walked, everybody around her was in fancy sports gear. And what she communicated was that women in Ghana have to walk so many miles to get water. And media covered it everywhere. It's been the most successful social campaign. So I think,
I think
you have to just create that creative
very
business.
important point, human interest stories and storytelling. I think that's the most critical, and that will resonate not just with the press, but also on social
I
handles.
just want to sign off by saying one important point. A lot of time this becomes a very comms-led activity, a CSR-led activity. I'm a firm believer it's a business-led activity. So the team has to have stakeholders from all
Okay,
business
time's
sectors.
up, but I'd just like to leave everyone with, one last thought, which is something that came up through the panel discussion itself, is the 7 A's around purpose-led strategies, which is number one, authenticity. Second one is around articulation. Third is act grants. Fourth is alignment. Fifth is action. Sixth is achievable. And the most important is, if you do all of this, then you have the authority and the command to actually go out in the market and actually stake a claim. So with that, I'd like to close the session, but if there are any, so that's everyone's input actually, the 7A strategy. We just coined it right here on the desk here for everyone's benefit. Thank you everybody for the lovely conversation.